What's up, you guys, and welcome to this video on fundraising for nonprofit leaders, individual fundraising. So I raised over $2.2 million over a 9-year nonprofit career, and 95% of that came from individuals and businesses as opposed to grant funding. So what I'm going to talk about here in this video doesn't have a lot to do with grant funding, although some of the principles will still apply in that space. What I'm talking about here is raising money from individuals and businesses within your community. So let's just jump right in, okay? I tell nonprofit leaders this all the time. If you can be great at relationship, you can be great at fundraising. I run into so many nonprofit leaders who believe that they aren't any good or don't have what it takes to be good at fundraising, which is baloney, right? Everyone has what it takes to be a great fundraiser. And let me let you in on a little secret. I've raised way more money from making people feel seen, heard, and understood than I have ever raised from having the perfect presentation, right? You catching my drift? Fundraising is more than the perfect presentation. It's more than strategy and tactics. It's about two humans connecting deeply and agreeing to help the world together. The fundraiser who understands this will achieve far greater results than the one who doesn't, and he or she will take a lot more pressure off of himself or herself to perform perfectly, right? But before we get into the more intangible and subtle aspects of being a great fundraiser, let's talk strategy for a little bit, right? Fundraising strategy is very simple. As they say, it's not rocket science or brain surgery or rocket surgery, whatever you want to say there, right? But understanding and executing upon the intangible, subtle nuances of fundraising strategy consistently over time, that can be quite difficult, right? So there are 4 steps to great fundraising strategy, and they are as follows. Number 1, connect. Number 2, share. Number 3, ask. Number 4, follow up. If you do these 4 things well and often, you will raise money for your nonprofit. But again, doing them and doing them well are 2 different things. So we must ask the question, what does it look like to do each of these well? And oftentimes, to see how to do something well, we have to see how to do it poorly first. So let me share with you a few of the ways I did individual fundraising poorly in my early days as a nonprofit leader. So let's start with the first element of that framework, connect, right? Early on, I was deeply worried about 2 things. I was worried about having enough money to live. When I started fundraising in 2016, I had to raise the entirety of my salary, benefits, and costs of engaging in the mission. Essentially, I was on a 100% commission pay structure, and I had to raise additional money for my benefits as well as anything else we did to execute the mission, right? And did I mention that my wife, Melanie, at the time, she quit her job when I started this journey. And I wanted her to be able to do this. But this also added some pressure to our financial situation. And we lived in a small 1-bedroom apartment and ate bologna and cheese sandwiches all the time to make it through this phase, right? But here's a funny story from that time. During that time, I was really trying to fight back against the tendency to hoard when money gets tight. In other words, although we didn't have much, I felt that it was really important for my overall health, as well as the health and success of my nonprofit endeavors, for me to remain generous. So on one particular day, I went to Walmart to get something, and I learned that the lady who was checking me out was due to have a baby soon. And something within me told me to get her a card and give her $60. And that something must not have known that we hardly had $60, right? But I obeyed that inkling and followed through on giving this lady a card and $60. And then I left Walmart and called Melanie to tell her the good news. And I shared that I gave away our nest egg, right? And she immediately broke into tears. Oh man, it was such a difficult time. And it was really difficult for me to stay positive and to operate without worry during those times, right? So the first thing I was worried about was simply just having enough to live and function, right? Number 2, the second thing I was worried about was I was worried about what the people whom I was asking would think of me when I asked them to donate money to my organization, right? It's no secret that people get weird when the topic of money is brought up. And if you ask them for money, they get really weird, right? The truth of the matter is that money is a great intoxicant in our world. And when you ask someone for money, sometimes it's like trying to pry a drunk from his drink. People react in odd ways, and I was scared of this. I also simply didn't like making other people feel uncomfortable. And I knew that asking people for money would make many of them uncomfortable. Additionally, I didn't want to be perceived as pushy or salesy or slimy. I was so worried about how other people would perceive me, and this worry kept me from success. right? And I carried all of this worry with me into meetings, and I have no doubt that it could be felt and that it impacted the way I interacted with people, with the people in front of me, right? Worry makes a person uptight. It keeps them from being their full self. And when one person is uptight, it often makes the people around them uptight, right? The uptight energy is contagious. And again, fundraising is about connecting deeply with the people in front of you. So to be a great fundraiser, you have to be loose and you have to give that person all of yourself, right? You have to create an energy of lightheartedness that makes connection possible. You can't carry heavy emotional baggage into these fundraising meetings. And of course, if we dive deeply into my fears, we'll see that there are internal knots that needed to be untied, right? Going back to my self-discovery portion of my nonprofit growth mastery framework. And to untie these knots, I had to move forward in the face of my fears and show myself a different reality, right? I had to stop worrying so much about the finances or what people would think, and I had to just connect with the people in front of me, love them, care for them as deeply as I possibly could, and trust that those other two things would take care of themselves in the process. And I found that they did, right? I showed myself a different reality by engaging faithfully in the action of just connecting with the people in front of me and being present in the moment. Now let's go to number 2, the second part of that framework, which is share. At the outset of my fundraising career, I was sharing all the wrong things, right? And here's what I mean by that. I was sharing the wrong things and in the wrong manner, right? So for me, every meeting was a sales presentation. I was trying to convince people to donate through statistics and facts and information, right? I'd even break out some PowerPoint slides or documents to go over with the potential donor, which immediately shifted the energy of the meeting from one of connection to one of me attempting to sell them something, right? And this approach kept me from being an effective fundraiser. And early on, I didn't know that I was supposed to be connecting more than selling, right? I didn't know the power of story. I didn't know that I was overloading people with information, right? It was all off. And let's move on to now the third piece of that framework, ask. In my early days as a nonprofit leader, I didn't ask boldly, confidently, and compellingly enough, right? My hesitant approach was a direct result of my inability to grasp the tremendous value in my mission and the role I played in executing that mission, right? In essence, it was a low view of myself and my mission that kept me from boldly inviting people to get involved with my organization. And again, this is an internal issue, right? Back to that self-discovery pillar. That's why I say that pillar is so important, right? It was an internal issue that I needed to work through. I needed to believe in the power of my mission, the significance of my mission, the value of my mission, right? And how it could change people's lives. I needed to believe in my effectiveness in carrying out that mission, right? I needed to believe in my own role and my own call in that mission. And backing away from full ownership of my mission and my role in the mission certainly cost my organization a lot of money through missed donations, right? And now on to the fourth piece of that framework, which is follow up, right? Early on, I failed to follow up well. I had a couple of challenges in this space, right? Number one, I felt awkward and as if I was bothering people when I followed up. I felt pushy. I felt as if they were thinking, okay, I get it. You want my money. Now back off, right? Of course, very few people with whom I followed up were actually thinking that. But even if they were thinking that, that's okay, right? I was pursuing an incredible mission. And if they didn't want to be a part of that, all they had to do was say no and I'd be on my way, right? I wasn't trying to force them or put pressure on them. I was simply doing my job well, which brings me to number 2. Number 2, I didn't know that following up is a part of doing the job well on behalf of the people I was called to serve, right? If you were trying to sell me a blender and I said, sure, I'll take one, and then we got separated before we could get to payment, would it be odd for me to feel bothered when you followed up with me? Or let's imagine that rather than saying, sure, I'll take one, I didn't clearly say, no, thank you. I don't want that, right? Would it be odd for me to be upset when you followed up? And if I were upset, if I were upset, the problem wouldn't be on your end, right? It would be on my end. I need to clearly state that I don't want the blender, right? It's a failure to communicate on my end, not on the end of the blender salesman. He's just doing his job and he's doing it well. And lastly, I didn't know the power of following up, right? Here's an important piece of information. Although receiving donations into your organization is one of your top priorities, donating to your organization is not a top priority of potential donors, right? They likely have a lot of other things to focus on. They all have busy lives, and because of this, they often appreciate quality follow-up. Most of them mean well, and they would like to get around to donating to your organization, but they need a little reminder every once in a while. I can't count the number of people who have said, "Oh yeah, thanks for the reminder, I'll donate now," right? Throughout the course of my nonprofit career. And I can't imagine the amount of money I would have missed out on if I didn't follow up well. Okay, so those are my challenges in those 4 spaces of that framework: connect, share, ask, and follow up. And now that we've talked strategy, let's talk about the more intangible and subtle aspects of fundraising, right? The big money is in understanding and implementing these aspects as a fundraiser, those intangible and subtle aspects, right? So first, you must understand that fundraising is about one thing. It's about trust. Have you ever heard the quote, people buy from people they know, like, and trust, right? To have deep trust, you need connection. You need people to know who you are on a deep level. And you need to connect with them on a deep level to the point where they see that you're a quality person worth trusting. In his book, Above the Line, Lessons in Leadership and Life from a Championship Program, Urban Meyer talks about the 3 C's of trust. He says to gain trust, you need 3 things. He said, number 1, you need to be a person of character. You have to have high integrity. Many times in a donor meeting, this starts with the general respect for the person sitting across from you, right? Being on time for the meeting, making sure the conversation is a two-way street, asking questions about them. He says, number 2, you need to be a person of competence. Depending on where you're at in your nonprofit journey, you don't have to be the best at what you do, right? But you have to show people that you're attempting to be the best at what you do. You have to show them that you care deeply about your job and your mission, and that you're doing all you can to be great at it. And then number 3, he said, you need to be a person who cares. We all know the old saying, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Again, you have to show potential donors that you care deeply about them. They can't be just another number to you. You can't be after them primarily for their money. They will sniff that out and then they will run from you, right? And to display that you're a person of character, competence, and care, you can't just tell someone straight up that you're a person of character, competence, and care. You have to show them that you are these things. And the best way to do that is through story, right? We'll talk about this more in the next pillar, the storytelling pillar. But for now, let's circle back. Fundraising is about one thing, trust, right? Don't get this twisted. Become a truly, deeply trustworthy person, and you will raise a lot of money. Okay, next, another intangible thing, right? The energy you bring into a fundraising meeting can kill or drastically improve your chances of receiving a donation, right? For example, when it comes to fundraising, if you're desperate for a donation, people will sniff that out from a mile away, and your desperation will push them farther away from donating to your organization, right? And so when I'm talking about energy, right, I'm talking about vibes. I believe that all human beings bring a certain vibe with them wherever they go. And so many of our vibe issues stem from issues within our internal landscape, right? Going back to untying those internal knots. If you're a person who's always looking for validation, people will feel that and be pushed away from connecting with you, right? If you're a person trying to force connections with others, people will feel that and be pushed away from connecting with you. If you're a person who is forcing a goal or agenda, people will feel that and be pushed away from connecting with you, right? And of course, I can't tell you what's inside of you. Those who have interacted with you a lot might be able to give you some idea of your tendencies, but the best thing you can do is dive inward and find those issues within yourself and then go to work on them. This is the law of attraction, right? Rather than trying to force something to come your way, you become that which attracts something to you, right? The more you can be a relaxed human being focused on connection and not results, right? Not monetary results in fundraising meetings, the more you can bring that energy, those vibes with you, and the more money will flow your way, right? And speaking of the energy or vibes that you carry, here's a sentence to remember. People buy in when you're bought in, right? Early in my nonprofit days, I did my best to be fully bought in on my vision and my path, but many times I sort of tiptoed reluctantly into opportunities to share that vision with others, right? In a sense, I was a bit shy and reserved about it, and I played the role of reluctant leader as opposed to the passionate believer, right? And I'm certain people could sense this reluctance, and I'm also certain that it was contagious, right? Belief is contagious. Passion is contagious. Confidence is contagious. When you step into your calling and own it 100%, people will get behind your mission. But if you tiptoe into your calling, you'll always find that people tiptoe into getting behind your mission if they get behind it at all. And of course, I'm not talking about false confidence or bravado. Be humble and be willing to admit what you don't know, but stand firm in the ambiguity, right? It's okay to not have everything ironed out. Display confidence that you'll figure it out as you need to figure it out, and that you're committed to seeing through the mission come hell or high water, right? People will get behind your confidence. Now let's return to the concept of flow, right? Let me provide you with what I call the airflow principle. I grew up in Texas, and I'm not sure if you know this, but it gets hot in Texas, right? And on top of that, I had a mom who is perpetually cold and a tiny bit cheap, so she wouldn't turn on the air conditioner until August, right? After about 30 days of 100+ degree temperatures. And growing up in this situation made me a master of cooling down, and in particular, a master of creating airflow within the house. And here's what I know about airflow within a house. If you want to create airflow, you have to create 2 openings, each on the opposite side of the house from one another. In other words, the air needs an entrance point and an exit point. If you only give it one or the other, no air will flow and you'll be disappointed, right? So let's tie this back to fundraising. Early in my fundraising career, I was scared to spend money. The organization didn't have much of it, and I was afraid that I'd spend too much of it and then not have enough to receive a paycheck and live, much less pay for our missional efforts, right? But here's an interesting observation that developed during this time. I found that not spending money actually kept me from receiving more money. It seemed that my scarcity mentality was a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? The more tight I became with the money, the less seemed to flow into the organization. Of course, I always left the door open to receive donations, right? I left the back door open, but I was scared to spend money, even on the things we desperately needed as an organization, so I closed that front door, right? And through this observation, I discovered an odd, paradoxical principle in our world, right? To receive more donations, I had to spend the money we had on the things we needed. Of course, I always had that back door open, like I said, for the organization. Nonprofits are always open to receiving donations, right? But I rarely opened the front door, so there was no flow within the organization. If I wanted to receive more, I had to open both doors and allow money to flow in and out of the organization. Now, there are 2 points to be made here, right? One, I'm not telling you to spend money frivolously. I'm telling you to identify high return on investment opportunities for your organization and to pull the financial trigger on these opportunities, right? You've heard the old saying, it takes money to make money. There are opportunities that can provide your organization with way more money than you spend on them. For example, consulting or training fees, right? Many nonprofit leaders are afraid to pay a consultant. First, they think they can do it all themselves, which just isn't true of anyone. We all need help. And second, they don't want to spend the money. But here's the truth. A good consultant can make your organization far more money than he or she takes from it. You just have to be willing to invest on the front end and trust that the return will be greater than the investment. And the more you can identify and invest in these high return on investment opportunities, the more your organization will grow, right? And the second point I want to make about this can be scary, right? To this day, when I pull the trigger on an opportunity that I believe is a high return on investment opportunity, I'm nervous. Even when I've done my research, I'm thinking, what if this is a waste of money? And let me be honest, I've been wrong a few times about things that I thought were high return on investment opportunities. But far more often I've been right, and these opportunities have paid off in big ways. And to return to the airflow principle, right? Just open the back door and the front door, and the money will flow. Lastly, ask yourself these 2 questions. What does my potential donor need, and how can I provide that, right? Again, this is another subtle piece of fundraising well. What does my donor need, and how can I provide that? And when you ask these questions, think about deep, universal human needs, right? As opposed to material, physical needs. What does every human want or need on a very deep level? And previously, I mentioned that I've raised more money from making people feel seen, heard, and understood than I've raised from the perfect presentation, right? When you get the deep truth in this statement, you hold the key to your success in fundraising. Meet the deep relational needs of people. Listen to them. Take a true, genuine interest in them, not for the sake of their money, but because they are a fellow human being. Enter into their story, invite them into your story. Be real, raw, authentic, transparent, and vulnerable with them, right? And we'll talk about all of this more in the storytelling pillar of what I cover. But my point is that humans respond favorably to genuine love and care. When you show someone that you care deeply about them, regardless of whether they donate to your organization, you remove the pressure from both them and you open up a much wider range of possibilities as a result of the interaction, and you drastically increase your chances of receiving a donation, right? Okay, so remember, fundraising strategy is simple. It's not rocket science, but understanding and executing upon the intangible, subtle nuances of fundraising strategy consistently over time can be difficult, right? Learn the strategy, but perfect the art of the intangible, subtle nuances, which is to say, perfect the art of loving humans well. Okay, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, share, follow, or subscribe, right? All of those actions help me reach more people with this message. And if you haven't already done so, join the Nonprofit Growth Mastery group that I run on Facebook. It contains other resources similar to this to help nonprofit leaders thrive and create thriving nonprofits. And lastly, if you're interested in diving deeper into the topic of individual fundraising and truly making genuine, lasting, substantial progress in this realm and many others that are absolutely necessary for your success in the nonprofit space, check out my online course. You can find more information about this on our website under the Our Products section. The product is entitled Boom Package, which includes the online course, coaching from me, and an online community of nonprofit leaders who are traveling the same path as you, right? They understand you and they can provide you with wisdom and encouragement as you seek to make your nonprofit dreams a reality. Otherwise, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service. Take care, friend.